Yo, welcome back to the channel, guys. Obviously, this is a NieR video essay, but there's a little bit of something else that we need to talk about before we get into that. You guys know that I left YouTube for a good bit of time. I've recorded this so many times, if you can't tell. I'm honestly kind of tired of recording it, but you know, it's important that I talk to you guys about not only what incited that, but also kind of where I'm at right now and how that looks for the channel in the future, starting with the death of my mom. At the end of 2022, a few days after Thanksgiving, in fact, I lost probably the most important person in my life up until that moment. I mean, my whole world shattered, you know, and I don't really want to get super emotional on camera, so I'm not gonna like go too deeply into that. But the last video I recorded during that time period was the Fears to Fathom video. I recorded it because I needed to have some familiarity. I needed to do something that distracted me from the fact that like literally the greatest support in my life had just crumbled basically. And after that, there were no videos. I mean, there are people I know personally who are subscribed to my channel that would stop me and ask me like, hey, when are you recording again? And honestly, the answer was just, I don't know, for a very long time. Just because I felt like with my mom passing, like to me, YouTube didn't feel like something I could continue. And this is partially thanks to Sparking Zero and everything. Shout out Toriyama, rest in peace the GOAT. But I've been feeling like doing YouTube. And I kind of come to the realization too, that it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to not do YouTube. It was more just like, if I did it, I had to do it right. I had to make it as successful as possible for her because she believed in that. She believed in that more than I did most days. You know, every like video that I recorded and that I upload, even the ones that I didn't upload, I mean, she's seen every single one of my videos up until that point, and suddenly to not have that was like just very hard for me. And I don't want to ramble too much because I can kind of feel myself drifting, I guess, conversationally. I just want to say that I'm back and I'm going to try to make the videos as bombastic as possible. And I'm also probably going to try to do like a monthly upload schedule as much as possible because I do want to really gear the channel toward a specific content and subject matter. The biggest thing is that I just needed you guys to understand that like this video, or at least this portion of it, was not for you guys. That's really crazy to hear from a YouTuber, but that's genuinely how I feel. It's not even really for me. It's for my mom, you know, the woman that believed in me, the woman that made me who I am today. And every action that I take and every step of success that I have, she's there. And I don't want the channel, something else that had that essence of her on it, to die, you know. So this is just me saying at the beginning of a NieR video essay of all things that I love you guys and I appreciate you guys, but also, you know, I love my mom, and wherever she's at, I hope that there are plenty of rivers and elephants and our family that loved and cared about us. But more than anything, you know, I miss you, Mom. The last couple of years have been really difficult not having anyone, and I felt very alone, I think. But every step that I take is going to be in your name, and I hope that there are a lot more steps, God willing, at least. And no matter what, it's because of you that this channel even exists. And it's because of you that I'm able to even be nearly as creative or, you know, bold or any of like the trademark things about me. You incited all of that. And I'm always going to love you for that, you know. And to my subscribers who didn't necessarily want to see this, I'm sorry, guys. Like I said, this part of the video isn't necessarily for anyone other than my mom, but I wrote some stuff down like years ago that I felt like I needed to say to her. I just didn't know how to do that and give her the proper space on my channel for that. But without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy the video. It's kind of a long one, but I put blood, sweat, and tears into it, as always. And see you in the next one. Peace. Typically, when I write out one of these magnificent scripts, I have an intro, something funny or witty to excite my adoring audience. Then I write out what is essentially an overarching message that I'm trying to take from the media that we're analyzing. Sometimes it's how anime titties changed me for the better. Other times it's a deep dive into themes of identity, religion, and philosophy as seen through the lens of popular media. Following that, I write out the third act, in which I bring it all together in a way that makes sense, hopefully, and conveys the importance of the media, the message, and my interpretation of those things. I write all of this just to say that this video is going to be quite a bit different because, frankly, since the last time I talked to you nerds, I've become quite a bit different. Yeah, ultimately, this is a retrospective on the NieR franchise, and we'll do my standard deep dive, but you need to understand why I needed to make this video and why I'm doing it in the way that I'm doing it beyond my goodbye letter. NieR Replicant and Automata, the games we'll be discussing in this retrospective series, are both games that deal with loss and love in a way that resonated with me before I even had the opportunity to experience those things as deeply as I have in the last few years. I've always wanted to make videos on these games, but frankly, they're so deep and special to me that I knew I needed to wait for the right moment, and I guess this is it. But first, a little bit of a preface. If you have not played these games and have even the slightest inclination to, then stop watching my video, go to Steam, Amazon, the PlayStation Store, or wherever it is that you buy games from, and play these titles before you watch my video. I say this partially because I kinda knew a bit about NieR Automata before I even played it, just the introductory portion of the game of course, but still, not having the opportunity to experience all of it with fresh eyes was the biggest disservice that I did for myself. Plus, these games are so much more than what they initially try to sell you on. Like yeah, we all came here for 2B's fatty, but by the time I left, dog. Your boy was contemplating his place in the cosmos, and sure, it's only apt that a big booty android elicit that response, but let's face it, none of us expected that, so play the game yourself. Anyway, grab your snacks, grab a bottle of great value water, some Funyuns, maybe even order a pizza, and let's take a look at NieR from a human perspective. Yes, this was a long intro. No, I'm not editing any of it out. Also, there will probably be a second part, maybe even a third, but I'm trying to finish these vids before Hogwarts Legacy comes out. I failed. NieR Replicant, formerly known as NieR Gestalt, was developed by Kavia and published by our benevolent gaming overlords at Square Enix. The same fools who developed my favorite video game of all time, Chrono Trigger. And there's probably a video on that coming soonish. Now, I could not talk about the NieR franchise, however, without briefly mentioning the anomaly of a person named Yoko Taro. Now, I could be very wrong about this, but as far as I know, he's never done an interview without his creepy mask on, and every game that he touches turns to gold. But as far as NieR goes, Gestalt was first released in North America on April 27th, 2010, in the year of our Lord and Savior, Bach the Beautiful. Years before dabbing would hit the world harder than crack hit minority communities, and back when Five Nights at Freddy's was merely a whisper on the wind, we were given our first glimpse into the post-apocalyptic, tsundere-filled hellscape that is NieR. Now, for reference, I did not play NieR Gestalt. I played the 2021 remake, NieR Replicant. So for the sake of my sanity, I will only be referencing that game. NieR Replicant opens in the summer of 2053 with the fam, a brother and his young sister, straight up struggling to scrounge for food and attempting to take shelter inside of a local grocery store from a particularly bad snowstorm. Like, you know it's bad when it's snowing in the summer. To make things worse, Yona, the young girl, is suffering from a full dose of that stanky lung, whilst my boy NieR tries his best to ignore the foreboding black books that lay on the ground nearby, even going as far as to smack one of them away when it attempts to lure him with the promise of power. As the scene continues, the ops start spinning on NieR's block, talking that nonsense. So our boy does what any angsty white-haired protagonist would do and accepts the power from the books. He does some demonic anime shit and caps the monsters attacking him and Yona. He also realizes that Shawty has touched one of the books, worsening her cough as some sick, nasty Orochimaru curse mark starts spreading over her skin. We leave the scene as NieR cradles his sister alone and without help. Playing a NieR game is like being able to control what happens in your favorite anime. However, like any great anime, there's at least one of these staples that you gotta hit. 1, a crazy, scantily clad shorty with fat anime titties. 2, a tournament arc, typically for no good reason. 3, a banging soundtrack, of course, to distract you from how mid the anime really is. And 4, the infamous time skip. Dog. NieR Replicant has 3 out of 4 of these tropes, and I am not gonna tell you which ones they are. Well, I lied, I actually am. Starting with our time skip, we fast forward 1,412 years into the future, where a young looking lad, all too familiar to our boy NieR, searches for a cure to his sister's mysterious illness. Sound familiar? At this point, the world seems to have regressed to a more medieval age, as we find NieR, Yona, and an entire village living with what can only be described as meager amenities. As NieR does his best to accept the tedious task thrust upon him by the villagers, we get a special look into his relationship with his young sister, Yona. Although things are rough and we never quite get a detailed explanation as to why they're living alone, it becomes clear from their interactions that Yona is a reason why NieR goes to such great lengths to take these really crappy jobs, taking care of her to the detriment of himself in some cases. And this will become a theme that resurfaces time and time again as the story progresses. As NieR does fetch quests for the locals, we find out that Devola and Popola, the 2 de facto leaders of the village, are diligently looking for a cure for Yona. Unfortunately, they don't find one quickly enough. Yona, being the little self-starter that she is, decides to head out in search of a lunar tear, a flower that NieR describes to her as capable of granting wishes. After realizing that his little sister is MIA, NieR discovers that Popola told Yona about a lost shrine where these lunar tears supposedly grow, and so he strikes out on a journey to find Yona before anything nefarious can happen. After fighting through numerous monsters, the same monsters from the prologue which we now know to be called Shades, NieR arrives at the top of the lost shrine where he meets none other than Grimoire Weiss. Now, I gotta stop and let you guys know just how cool Grimoire Weiss is. If there is a reality in which I gain dark powers befitting of my lordly station, the first thing I'm doing is immortalizing myself as a sentient book of arcane power and knowledge, and that's all because Grimoire Weiss is just that guy. After using the magic of Weiss to defeat the 2 guardian statues, we discover the similarities between the prologue and the current timeline don't just end with Shades, sassy floating books, or white-haired, potentially Valyrian lads. Yona has once again worsened her condition as the accursed disease known as the Black Scrawl begins flaring up. We also learn during the scene that it is somehow linked to the monstrous Shades, though we're not really given much more than that. Upon returning to the village, NieR pays a visit to Devola and Popola, where he learns that Weiss is a legendary artifact of sorts. First appearing in the Song of Ancients, it is foretold that upon collecting the sealed verses, he'll fight against Grimoire Noir, the black book from the prologue, and go on to restore peace to the world. Now at this point, I'm sure you can see where this is going. It's time to go look for some arbitrary yet world-altering magic so that we can save the world, but mostly our sister, baby. Cue the anime travel arc that we've all been waiting for. At this point in the game, you're tasked along with Weiss to go find these sealed verses, but we can't do all that lame stuff alone. It is a Square Enix game after all, so you know we gotta go find our party members. Ending up in the Eyrie, a racist town with admittedly dope architecture, we meet the half-human, half-shade Kaine, whose name I definitely mispronounced until the first time I heard it. After helping K-Floppa beat down a fat boy Shade in the Eyrie, we learn that because of her trauma from being ousted from her own racist-ass village, Shorty just isn't jacking the city life, so she refuses to enter the village. It was probably around this point in the game, however, when I stopped sort of meandering in my playthrough, only hopping on for 30-minute stints here and there. This is the part of the game where I realized, God damn, boy, this might be some of that heat I've been hearing about. Fuck. Next, we end up going to the manor where we meet Emil, a character very dear to my heart for multiple reasons which I will elaborate on, mostly in part 2 of the series. Needless to say, Emil is dope. As you wander throughout the manor, you'll find shades, but you'll also find these weird out-of-place statues. Either way, you learn of Emil's unfortunate ailment that causes him to turn anyone he gazes upon into stone. When bro said he stopped Shawty in her tracks, he wasn't lying.
What do you mean by that?
Anyway, after linking up with young Emil and Kaine, we've got our party. The foul-mouthed tsundere with literal demon strength, our resident mage Emil, who can leave the hottie speechless with the drop of his blindfold, and Grimoire Weiss, our talking, well, Grimoire, who is a gentleman at his core. It is also here where we finally get to explore other locations in the game, such as the Junk Heap, the port town of Seafront, Facade, which is the city in the desert where we meet Sex, aka the King of Facade, and finally we travel to the Forest of Myth. And it's here where something known as the Death Dream has begun afflicting the villagers with their own choose-your-own-adventure game that causes them to die. I'm not joking, this is a part of the game. Now this is a lot of information that I've given you guys, but trust me when I say this is still a very abridged version of the events of the game. I struggle between making this watchable but also filling in as much detail as possible. Just know that in each of the aforementioned locations, we find a sealed verse, which not only bolsters our power superficially, but also grants us these really cool secondary abilities, such as spawning hands of dark energy, or creating spikes of blood and magic to pierce our foes. At this point in the game, I was about 30 hours in. Now, I'm the kind of gamer that needs to explore every nook and cranny of a game. I want to experience each side character's story and see the game in at least most of its intended glory. That's why after dying numerous times in the choose your own adventure segment, spending hours ruminating over what it means to exist unwanted by the community that you belong to, or helping to facilitate a king's rise to power, and most of all taking in the small but immersive world of NieR Replicant, I was excited to be done with it. After all, things seemed to be hinting at an end, which was drawing closer. Plus, I had done all of the side quests up until this point and was happy with the journey. So, as I finish up the last side quest that I had been given, delivering a letter from the postman in Seafront to a lady living in the lighthouse, a side quest that I will come back to, I made my way back to the village, only to find it being attacked by presumably the final boss, no less. As I rush back into the village, Kaine, Emil, and Grimoire Weiss at my side, the journey to get here suddenly floods to the front of my mind. I think of all of the stupid fetch quests I did that led to these really poignant and deep character moments. I think back on Popola and Devila and all of the villagers that I've grown so attached to. I think about that little garden that I've begun cultivating right outside NieR and Yona's house, and how this deep into the journey, I will not lose those things. And so, we fight. The gang versus the shade of immense magnitude. As we trade blows leading it from the village toward the library that Popola and Devila frequent, it gets down to the wire. Grimoire Noir appears and begins attempting to absorb Weiss, taking away the sealed verses we spent the last 30 hours seeking out. And as Kaine goads Weiss, calling him a little bitch, Emil screams out a last cry of hope, and NieR stands, wielding his weapon despite the damage done to him already. The true enemy finally appears, looking down on us. A shade that looks identical to NieR, except he's holding Yona. I knew what to expect playing this game. I mean, I had beaten Automata maybe 6 months before Replicant even released. However, I couldn't help but feel at this moment, every seemingly meaningless moment and interaction in this game was culminating in one decisive moment where we would stand victorious over the forces of darkness, seeking to take our beloved Yona from us. Except, it isn't. With Grimoire Weiss, we reclaim the sealed verses and the power that comes with each of them. However, this fight is not one that we win. As a bolt of blood and dark energy races toward Weiss, NieR jumps in its path, taking the spike straight through his chest. Yona is taken by the Shadowlord. However, that shade that he summoned still balks at the door that Kaine holds shut. So, as her shade form begins taking over, she asks Emil to petrify her, a final act of sacrifice to save the few people willing to accept her, as well as the village. Emil sits there dumbfounded at what he should or should not do, but we're given two options by the game: petrify Kaine, sealing away the shade, or do nothing and be annihilated. As Kaine says her goodbyes, Emil removes his blindfold and Kaine is petrified. We have completed the first half of NieR Replicant. Now, it's pretty clear to me what you guys may be thinking. Oh, King, hurry up and get to the next part of the story. Well, listen here, fools. I'll get to that lame stuff here in a few, but for now, there are a couple of notable mentions from Act 1 that I specifically do not want to backtrack to later in the video, more specifically, a quest line that takes place in Seafront Town. Minor spoilers ahead. After a certain point in the game, it will become apparent that Popola and Devila are going to be the de facto quest givers of sorts, ultimately helping NieR to locate work in order to take care of Yona. One of the quests that Devila gives you is one of my favorites in the entire game, but not for the reasons you'd expect. After talking to Devila, she'll send you to a postman in Seafront Town who asks you to take a letter to a little old lady living in the town's lighthouse. After climbing up the tower, giving her the letter, and running off with an extra 1,000 gold, the quest concludes and you go about your business, slaying shades, hanging out with the homies, and trying to save your kid sister. However, upon returning to Devila, she asks you to go back to Seafront Town, where you find the postman and the lighthouse lady arguing due to her wanting to leave the village. The postman will go to you, asking that you speak to her and bring her to her senses. Understandable, as there are monsters roaming the entire countryside. Unfortunately, when you go to the lighthouse, you soon discover that her asking to leave wasn't just on a whim. It was the wish of a dying woman. This woman has contracted the same illness as Yona. This woman has contracted the Black Scrawl. And rather than silently succumbing to it, she wishes to visit her love one last time. Her love is the man that regularly writes her letters, one of which we've already delivered. After discussing it with GW, Vice posits that we head back to the post office and convince the postman to honor her final wish, a request that he vehemently denies before telling you to come back tomorrow. This is a clear red flag to the glorious likes of Grimoire Vice, who tells you to go back inside, where you find that it's been the postman writing letters to the old woman this entire time. After being told to check out the back room by the postman, you find that he has not only been masquerading as her lover for years, but that her lover died a very long time ago, and that the postman is essentially trying to maintain this elaborate facade for the sake of an elderly woman's heart. After being confronted with this, we're given a final letter from her love, telling her to wait for him as he is currently traveling back to see her in Seafront, and we're given two options yet again. Option 1, to tell her the truth. An option where she relays to you that she knew about the facade this entire time and was just happy that the town cared enough about her to maintain a lie. And option 2, to maintain the lie. An option where the lighthouse lady declares her happiness as she waits for her true love. The final quest in this chain is called Closure. After returning to Seafront, again at the behest of Devila, the postman informs you that the lighthouse lady has died. Then he asks you whether or not you told her the truth. Now, the reason why this quest specifically was deserving of its own little section is because of how it highlights a deeply disregarded aspect of the human experience: willful ignorance, especially when matters of the heart are involved. By giving us the option to remove the veil of lies created by the people and the postman of Seafront Town, we're given the heavy task of putting someone face to face with a reality that has always been a facade, a lie created so that the townspeople didn't have to face this uncomfortable truth. The crazy part is she knew, and to me that speaks volumes about my own life. How many truths am I aware of that I'm just unwilling to accept, and yet, does that make it wrong for me to look away? For myself, being the kind of person that I am, I know the answer now, but when I first played this game, most of you may be surprised to hear that I maintained the lie, both in the game and within my own life. Needless to say, this is the questline that kept me thinking about the game long after I turned it off, and for no other reason than my appreciation for its depth. Hopefully, I could share some of that depth with you guys here today. My brother in darkness, let me tell you something. I've seen a lot of time skips in my day, but NieR Replicant may have the best one. After 5 years of being that guy, my boy NieR is squarely in his Sasuke Uchiha arc. The way that they reintroduce my boy is just so glorious, as he quickly dispatches a group of shades with finesse. Anyway, we quickly learn that the homie NieR hasn't really made all that much progress when it comes to saving his sister. However, he has grown a lot stronger. The shades are much stronger now as well. Now immune to sunlight and having gained the awareness to don armor and weapons, humanity now seemingly on the back foot as resources begin growing scarce. With Kaine still petrified and NieR on a mission of vengeance, the gang broke up at some point within those 5 years. So, Dizzle sends NieR a letter stating that he may have discovered a cure for Kaine in her petrified state. But as NieR and Emil journey through his manor, we soon discover that the cure for petrification requires Emil to fight and fuse with an entity that is revealed to be his twin sister, Halawa. As if it wasn't already, this is where the lore gets absolutely insane, to the point that I'm not even sure I understand it fully. So Emil and Halawa, aka number 6 and number 7, were child test subjects in a series of experiments meant to turn them into living weapons. Think Wolverine and the Weapon X program. Evidence of this is notably seen in Edot's ability to petrify anything he looks at, an ability that the government would obviously take pretty seriously. Anyway, after Emil fuses with Halawa, his human form is shed and he takes the form of this strange skeletal creature that is now able to control his abilities. So both he and NieR return to the library in order to free K Dizzy from her imprisonment and continue on their journey. After heading back to the old lost shrine, the gang finds a strange and broken stone rune, which we later find out from Popola is a cipher that can allow us to find the Shadowlord. Now, with the new quest to embark on, the gang goes and revisits all of their old haunts in the hopes of attaining these fragments and saving Yona. And this is where the game takes a turn, a dark one at that. After entering the Shadowlord's castle through the lost shrine, it becomes quickly apparent that the Shadowlord and his army of shades will not make this an easy task, causing us to fight with everything in us just to make it from one room to the next. At one point, however, a large shade in the form of a boar strikes when our guard is down, causing a grand battle and the arrival of the King of Facade, Sex. As we continue to battle this creature of darkness, it seems that this will be where our journey ends, as the boar simply does not let up. That is until the King of Facade decides to sacrifice himself in order for NieR and his friends to fulfill their promise to Yona. We leave Sex to die at the hand of the shade, but we continue forward with our journey, only to encounter none other than Devila and Popola. Now look guys, this scene was mind-boggling for me for a couple of reasons. I don't know if maybe I thought the shorties were really just NPCs with cool ass character designs, or if I just assumed they had nothing more to add to the plot. But when it's revealed that they're not even humans, my brain melted a little bit. I had to pause the game and set the controller down. For you guys to really understand this next part though, we're gonna have to take a little blast to the past. After the events of the Drakengard series, during one of the endings to the final game, a dragon is warped from that setting to modern day Japan along with this eldritch entity taking the form of a giant bald woman. After the dragon defeats the giant, bits of flesh begin disintegrating off of it, dispersing and flooding the world in what we know to be a substance called Maso particles. What really happened was the doom of the world in which NieR Replicant and NieR Automata take place. As the Maso particles spread, so too did a disease that would go on to ravage the population of Earth, simply known as white chlorination syndrome. Devila and Popola go on to describe how every group of humans that we've met up until this point, including themselves, are soulless beings known as replicants, beings created as part of Project Gestalt, mankind's final attempt to save itself from white chlorination syndrome. Now this is going to get a bit crazy as I describe what exactly Project Gestalt even is, what replicants really are, and how that affects the world building that we've come to love by this point in the game. Long story short, early humans, early meaning when the project was first created, wish to do what humanity does best, endure. But with WCS spreading and being incurable, humanity sought to do the unthinkable in a desperate act of scientific fuckery. Humanity wished to separate their souls from their bodies likely dying in the process, but their souls becoming what they called gestalts, at least until they found out a cure for or simply outlasted that stank. Now, with their souls being taken care of, they needed to ensure that a physical form would be available to every human that underwent this process. There's no point in having millions of souls chilling on the block if they won't have their bodies to go back to at the end of all this, right? Hence, where replicants fell into the equation. These soulless bodies which were created from the genetic data of a corresponding gestalt. So to break this down even more for those of you who are still confused, a person undergoes this process and splits their souls from their bodies, which then takes the form of a gestalt. They then have a genetic replicant of themselves created in order for their gestalt, or soul, to hop back into in 1,000 or even 10,000 years if it takes that long. And in doing so, humanity doesn't die, but merely freezes themselves in time while their replicants maintain the state of the world as much as possible. This concept was profoundly interesting to me when Devla and Popola broke it down the first time. Not only that, but we find out that the Shadowlord was the first gestalt, and every gestalt created from his DNA palette had the same inherent genetic instability that he has, resulting in these goofy replicants gaining self-awareness, rejecting their gestalts, aka literally rejecting their souls, and causing the black scrawl to occur on themselves. This is also why some gestalts are hostile, and it's those gestalts that we've been murdering for the entire game. Dog. I'm over here thinking, oh, we're just a silly little white-haired anime boy with our silly crew of misfits, saving the day, killing weirdly behaving monsters, and going on about our lives, la-da-da. Bro, I was so wrong. The implications that every shade we've killed up until this point in the game was merely a human soul waiting to go back to its body is insane. Like, I immediately turned my game off and didn't play it for a couple of days. Insane. At which point, I had to go back and replay everything because I'm a dumbass who forgot to save. But the Dark Lord digresses. We also learn, and this is the last little bit of exposition that they give, that Grimoire Noir and Grimoire Vice are meant to fuse in order to begin the process of bonding gestalts to replicants, bringing humanity back from their stasis and bringing them back from the brink of extinction. When I was a teenager, maybe about 14 to 15 years old, I, as many of you know by now, was deep into my infatuation with Naruto. The characters, the magic system, and world building were simply phenomenal in my opinion, and definitely something that I'll touch on more at the appropriate time. However, a particularly poignant point in the story that always stuck out to me was when you find out that the village hidden in the leaves may have been more than a place filled with sometimes judgmental but admittedly good people, more than a place where so many of the story's heroes and friendly faces resided, but rather a place where darkness was born and atrocities were committed in the case of many of its characters. I mean, that becomes the whole catalyst for Sasuke leaving, gaining strength, and then returning for his revenge, in order to stop the monster that is the Hidden Leaf Village from destroying more innocent lives. This is also dually reflected in another series that I love very deeply, Berserk. At a certain point in the story, you realize that Guts may be the villain. Perhaps not to us as the audience, but in the lives of many of that world's inhabitants whom he crosses paths with in the pursuit of his vengeance. In NieR Replicant, this is the moment when we realize that we are the monsters, the Guts, the Hidden Leaf Village of this story. And for anyone who's been hurtful to others without realizing the effect that it had on them until it was way too late, this is that exact same feeling that the game evokes at that moment. Not anger or joy, but shame.
Popola, let's stop this now.
Stop? Stop? Now you want to stop? You think you have the luxury to stop? You cut down my sister like a goddamn animal and now you want to stop? Popola! doesn't have to. No one stops. It's way too late to stop. No one stops.
But that's silly, right? Video games aren't meant to evoke such a visceral human response. At least not like this. I mean, the games I play should make me happy. They should be fun. So why after playing this portion of NieR Replicant do I feel hollow? Why do I sometimes sit in bed contemplating that one side quest or the weird way a shade acted in that one seemingly unimportant cutscene? It's because NieR Replicant is teaching me what it means to be human. And in this particular scene, we wrestle with the fact that we're not one of the good ones. The twins reveal that they aren't humans or replicants, but something else entirely. They're the overseers of Project G, and as it stands now, the project is failing all because of NieR. What happens next is the heartbreaking fight between Devila, Popola, and our gang, which comes to a brutal conclusion as Emil sacrifices himself to stop an enraged, grieving Popola after her sister dies. The dust settles and our three remaining protagonists rush into the Shadowlord's chamber. Another fight with NieR unfolds and it's revealed to us that the Shadowlord, the very same version of NieR that we played in the prologue and the original Gestalt for our replicant NieR, was the last beacon of hope for mankind, becoming so after he touches Grimoire Noir in the beginning. We then learn that the OG Yona from the prologue getting sick after touching Grimoire Noir was all due to her having an immediate relapse. This event led to the Shadowlord continuing to be the OG Big Daddy Gestalt, and it is also the reason why Yona's replicant will always develop the Black Scrawl. She's in a continuous cycle of her replicant being recreated, living to a certain point, and then relapsing with the Black Scrawl, essentially being a genetic error that loops within her false bodies. It is implied that whenever this happens, the Shadowlord awakens, senses Yona relapsing, and then abducts her in order to return replicant Yona to her original body. After a heated bout with the Shadowlord, NieR bobbing then weaving, the Shadowlord smacking our boy with that thing, and Grimoire Weiss arguably being the best hype man in history, Gestalt Yona wakes up. She tells the Shadowlord that she's sorry, but hearing the replicant Yona, she decides to be selfless and then steps into the sunlight, essentially committing suicide, and then leaving the Shadowlord to put up one last fight in desperation. As the battle between Gestalt and Replicant resides, with their great enemy defeated, Weiss's physical form is destroyed due to overexerting himself magically. Replicant NieR and Yona reunite, but without the original Gestalt still alive, the remnants of Replicants and Gestalts alike will go extinct. Okay, so we've beaten the game, the day is saved, and we got our sister back, right? Wrong. This game has 5 different endings, some of which that build on top of each other to culminate into the one true ending. Because let's face it, NieR and Yona going back to the village and living a seemingly normal life after essentially condemning humanity to extinction is super bleak. Before I even knew that the game had several endings, I actually was so frustrated with how the game ended that I almost uninstalled it and hid it on Steam. So I'm just gonna speedrun these endings as fast as possible for you guys. Ending A picks up with us hesitating to deal the final blow to the Shadowlord. NieR hurries to Yona, upset when she doesn't seem to stir, but alas, Weiss is not dead just yet. Although his physical form is destroyed, he has enough strength left to speak, telling NieR that Yona will awaken when someone says the name of the one she loves most. We're then given a prompt to write a name. Once that's done, if you type the name of the person she loves most, Yona will see NieR for the first time in 5 years, and then Kaine will head out telling NieR she has her own shit to take care of. This ending concludes with a young NieR and Yona outside of the house as Yona gives NieR a lunar tear. We cut back to an older Yona and Shadowlord about to take each other's hand, alluding to Gestalt NieR and Yona reuniting. Ending B basically starts the same as ending A. After NieR defeats the Shadowlord, the scene changes however, to Gestalt NieR scrunched up and weeping to himself in this plain white void as he regrets all the hardships he put Yona through. A flashback occurs with Yona and himself alone in the grocery store. He tells her that he isn't hungry while she tries to force him to eat something. The scene then reverts back and images of enemies that Replicant NieR previously killed gaze upon him. Gestalt Yona in her young form comes to greet him, however, thanking him for always being there and offering him a cookie. Lastly, and I gather this will make you fools pretty happy, we cut to our boy Emil, who survived the blast against Popola and crash lands in the desert. Now just ahead, he goes out to search for NieR and Kaine, bouncing and rolling into the distance. Alright guys, now this is arguably the darkest ending, and it is a continuation of endings A and B. After NieR defeats and kills the Shadowlord, Kaine begins to succumb to the Black Scrawl as she tries to leave. She then goes into her shade form, forcing a fight with NieR. After Kaine is incapacitated, Kaine's shade, Tyron, explains to NieR how he can save her, either by killing her or forgoing his entire existence for her sake. If the player chooses to kill Kaine, NieR stabs her as he offers her a kiss, finally ending her pain, and maybe even revealing a little bit about their relationship dynamic at this point. Tyron tells NieR that Kaine's last words to him were thank you, then a lunar tear falls next to a distraught NieR. He picks it up as he gazes through the nearby window before returning home to live with Yona, both of them living out their remaining days before they inevitably succumb to the Black Scrawl. If the player chooses to sacrifice NieR's existence for Kaine, the player's data is erased and everyone forgets he ever existed. NieR disappears while Yona thanks Kaine for saving her. A lunar tear falls on the ground, which Kaine picks up. When she holds it, she has a flashback of NieR and mentions that it feels like she's found something very special. A mysterious program relating to the Replicant system begins its execution in the Forest of Myth. Kaine wakes from sleeping with tears streaming down her face, tormented by nightmares. She remembers nothing, save for the strong feeling of losing something precious. In a search to discover what that could be, she finds her way into the depths of the Forest of Myth's tree, Sleeping Beauty, which has somehow been overrun with technology and wires. In the depths of the tree, she meets an AI that is in charge of that particular data terminal. As a safety protocol, the terminal begins creating android copies of Kaine to keep her away, but she eventually breaks through their ranks with the help of Emil, who's found his way back to her. The gang defeats the AI and begin harnessing the muscle power within the tree. The erased NieR is then reconstructed from the memories of his first visit to the Forest of Myth, Kaine holding him within the petals of a giant lunar tear. From start to finish, NieR Replicant is weaving this thread of character, action, and drama in a way that so few games are able to even come close to. Not to mention the exquisite music in this game that is only rivaled, in my opinion, by the likes of Persona 5 and this game's sequel. The true wonder for me, however, is how Replicant manages to evoke themes of consequence that are so often lost in other stories. We destroy the souls of other humans, damning the last remnants of a dying species, and become a vagabond in the process. Why? All for a little girl that's not even really a human. But in my mind, that's what it means to be human. Although from a certain angle, lens, or perspective, we are in the wrong, which we definitely are, at its core, we're playing a game where a brother's love for his sister forces him to become a man who would stop at nothing to save and protect her. Even if the intent is selfish, I'd expect nothing less from a human because we're flawed, emotional, and at our core social creatures that need each other. In contrast, matters of theology and self are way more pertinent in the game's sequel, which we'll play at some point. NieR Replicant showcases both the joys and the horrors of being a human in a way that left me feeling hopeful at the end. NieR sacrificed himself for his sister and his friends as they would have done the same for him. So as NieR awakens atop the towering lunar tier, surrounded by friends that love him and a decaying world, I couldn't help but to shed a tear of my own. Because to me, all of those things represent what it means to be a human. Alone but connected to the people that you love in a world that doesn't care about you or actively seeks to harm you sometimes. This was NieR from a human perspective.